You're watching What She Said on YouTube.
Welcome back. This is What She Said. I'm Sharon Caddy. Christine Bentley is here too. And we have a guest in studio now that is an actor, a writer, and a producer. A woman who was named by Grid magazine in 2013 as a person who made Toronto a better place because of her play Tainted. Welcome to Kat Lantane. Welcome to What She Said.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Now this, as soon as I saw we were doing this just brought back a flood of memories. I remember the news stories, but more importantly, I know people who ended up with Hep C from this. For people that maybe are not as familiar with the background, could you just give us a background on the news story that gave birth to the play?
So the Tainted Blood Crisis was and is the worst public health disaster in Canada that we endured. It's the story of how 30,000 Canadians became infected with HIV and hepatitis C through tainted blood, either through transfusions or through their medication that was blood-based. And the reason why it turned from being a crisis to a scandal is that the tainted blood survivors and the people that were impacted started to dig to find out why and how they were exposed and they were infected. And that discovery was extremely dark and upsetting because they realized that, in fact, it could have been prevented. Mm-hmm. And that Health Canada and the federal government, the provincial governments, and the Red Cross didn't take the proper measures in order to protect the blood supply when HIV came onto the scene and was a new bloodborne virus.
Right. Now, what was it that you saw in this news story that would lead you to think that I could make a play? Because the two would not seem congruous.
Well, I tried to make a film first because I thought it would be an incredibly compelling film to tell, because the big piece about it is really the personal story and how people dealt with it and how they fought to stay intact, and while this terrible thing was happening to them. And I couldn't get the film up. So when I went back to theatre school, I went to the Bristol Vic in the UK, it reminded me how theatre has a reach that sometimes film doesn't because of its immediacy, because everybody's in the same space. And so theatre again was really in my heart. And then I met a man about 4 years later, I think, at a fundraiser. And he was a co-infected hemophiliac and one of the last of his generation that's still alive.
Wow.
So he told his story to me, and I connected with him, and I just realized that I had to get it out because it actually had never been told in a fictional way. And if you don't keep these stories alive, there's really no way for people to understand what happened because the issue is so complex. Mm-hmm. So I was able to distill that story in 100 minutes.
And was he the only person involved in the play, or were there other people?
Oh, no, I went on a cross-country journey, actually, in Canada, interviewing tainted blood survivors, their family members, some of the key counsels during the Creever inquiry, the lawyers that were there representing the victims. I interviewed doctors, scientists. I spent some time talking back and forth to Justice Horace Creever, who's still alive. And so the research has now spanned about 12 or 14 years, but that piece was about a 2-year journey.
Wow.
Yeah.
And was the reaction among the survivors or people who'd been through it pretty much the same, or was it all over the map?
It was actually pretty much the same, and it was a really overwhelming experience last year when the play came out in Toronto and we did it, because, I was really nervous because those people were coming, so they were going to be judging to see if this family that I had created, they're a fictional family, but they're all inspired by real people, what read as authentic. And it was overwhelming. It was just, a lot of tears. It was, but also there was an opportunity for them, I think, to be acknowledged in a way that they hadn't been before. And for people who had lost people to feel like other people cared, meaning the other people in the audience that were sitting with them, and that gave them a broader sense of a community. And there was this one afternoon that I'll never forget. It was a matinee performance, And a woman walked on the stage after the show, and she grabbed a piece of the set.
Oh, wow.
And she walked out of the theater with it, and she was clutching it to her chest. So it's a piece of theater, but also a story that people really connect with. And so that was a relief. But I think that it was a realization for me that we needed to get to this story to as many people as possible. It's also a huge piece of the AIDS crisis that's never been told, because we've seen plays like Angels in America or The Normal Heart or films like that, but we've actually never seen a story about a working class family who endured that era.
It's interesting that this is, as you say, it's theater as telling a story, but it's also theater as education.
Yeah, it's kind of, somebody had mentioned something when they came. They were CBC folk, and they came and they said, there was a lot of journalism inside the play.
Yeah.
That was walking me through, because we get it. The oldest son is a lawyer, and it's his journey to find out how and why the blood crisis happened. So we find out a lot of information through him, but we're still seeing this family drama. So it's not this didactic piece of theater, and it's not a docudrama. It's not a verbatim piece of theater. And so you get a Canadian history lesson and a lesson on the public healthcare system, and then the inside of this family drama all in one.
The feedback you're getting, what is the main emotion people leave the theater with? Are they somewhat angry? Are they sad? Are they what are they left with?
I think a lot of people left with a feeling of wanting to take action, which was really interesting. Their hearts were broken a little bit, but they also had this real need to stand up for those people, and to sort of keep telling the story and have it be in their consciousness. So it's, even though it's a drama and it can be sometimes a really difficult play to watch and experience, they left with this connected feeling, and that was pretty spectacular.
I'm sure that one of the things that you found after interviewing all these people, and now with the play and probably getting some feedback from the audience, is that it left an impact that has sort of gone through generations in the families that were affected.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because when you take 30,000 people and you multiply that in Canada, especially because, there's only 30 million of us or so, it's pretty incredible because it's reverberated across the country. And when you look at the timeline, the last $1 billion package that the federal government gave out to people who were infected with hepatitis C was only in 2007. Mm-hmm. So it actually is quite fresh for a lot of people. And for a lot of people who are still alive, they're dealing with the long-term effects of having HIV and hepatitis C. So it's very live and well for those people.
And one of the tragedies, of course, is you get blood in an operation in a hospital room, so you're not running out to test to make sure that your blood is okay. So your doctor, if you're going for a physical, is testing for normal run-of-the-mill stuff, unless there's some reason for them to say, okay, I'm going to test for 10 more of the 5,000 things I could test for. So many people didn't find out for a long time because there was no reason to test.
Well, and this is what gave rise to the whole banking your own blood before operations you have to have.
Well, there was a tragic story in Montreal about a man who did that, and he went in for heart surgery. His family had all come in and donated blood for him for his surgery, and they had all been tested, etc., and they didn't use it, and he was infected with HIV.
Oh, no.
This was back in the day. But, they had such a resistance to inform people. The bureaucratic inertia was so enormous across the board, and there was such a major lack of leadership and fear because they realized that they had left things so late, and all of a sudden they had this dragon that had been unleashed in the country, and that's what led to so many infections. And there's documentation that's coming out now that's saying that they think that it actually might be 60,000 people infected with Hep C because so many of the people with hepatitis C weren't informed, as you mentioned, and they might have and probably have passed it on through their sexual partners. So that's a whole other beast there. And that's not a very nice illness to have. Hepatitis C is very difficult.
You're watching What She Said on YouTube.
It's one thing to reach the general public, which is a huge thing, but you are stepping it up. This is actually going to be reaching up to Queen's Park and Parliament Hill. Tell us about that.
Well, we did, when we finished the show last year, there was so much demand to see the play. It's very expensive to remount a play right away. And so the answer was to do this tour of this reading. And it came into play because over the course of making the play, we discovered that a private pharmaceutical company was trying to open up private blood donor clinics here in Ontario, which goes against the Creaver Inquiry recommendations, which is that donors should not be paid for their blood. It's a fundamental principle that came out of the tainted blood crisis and that inquiry to keep our blood system safe. And so I started to advocate and lobby Queen's Park to ensure that they don't do that. And the play sort of accidentally became, you know, a fulcrum for people to gather and understand why that's not a good idea, which was really amazing. And I was able to get, it was Deb Matthews, who was the health minister at the time, her policy advisors down to see the play. So since then, the Liberal government has now introduced the Voluntary Blood Donor Act, which is not law yet. It's only had a first reading. And that will ban the sale of paying donors for their blood. So
That's in Ontario,
that's
right?
in Ontario. Yes, that's in Ontario.
And so do we know about the rest of the country?
So Quebec's already done that, but
Okay.
the other provinces across the country haven't. I'm going to get them to.
Look at you. You look determined.
Oh,
But
are there any clinics, though, where people are being paid
no,
to
they
give
stopped
blood
them. So
in-
far, they've stopped them.
Okay.
So I wanted to go and take the play to Queen's Park and to Parliament Hill to really be able to connect with this generation of politicians so they understand that they must protect the public blood supply and they also must fund our public health system, and that their legislative decisions actually have an impact on people, and that impact can be incredibly grave and dark if they don't understand our own Canadian history and the complexities of the tainted blood crisis. So I want to bring them home.
And did you get the opportunity to speak with many of the MPs or the MPPs following performance to sort of see what they did take with it, to take from it?
I was able to speak with a few. I mean, my federal MP, Matthew Kelway, has been an incredible champion and has really helped me learn the process because I'm new to that whole process of politics, so that's been incredible. And Frangelina has been amazing, and like I said, Deb Matthews and those people they were really touched, I think.
Kat, my question is, I don't understand what the pro would be about selling your blood. I understand what would be the con, you know, the cons.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I don't understand what are the arguments on the other side that would be in any way
Beneficial.
compelling
Yep.
to anyone.
Well, it's incredible because, you know, that pharmaceutical company with their $1 billion, and, you know, there's a few of us citizens in my play running, you know, chasing them down at Queen's Park from hallway to hallway. So blood products that are plasma-based, many of them come from the United States. Most do. And in the United States, they still pay some of their donors to give plasma. And the pharmaceutical companies argue, because they've had this system for so long and they've really corporatized and privatized healthcare there, that this is the only way that they can get enough of it to make the drugs, because you need quite a lot. They pool it, you know, in these processing plants to make a small amount of medication. And so that's the argument, that if they can control that market, they can get as much as they need in order to make that medication. And during the tainted blood crisis, Justice Horace Creever's number 2 recommendation after compensating people was that donors should not be paid. So we've actually learned that lesson, that that's not a good idea. The problem is that because science hasn't caught up We still don't have all of our plasma medications haven't become synthetic. Some have, like the hemophiliacs today. Most of them were wiped out in Canada who were dependent on that plasma medication, something called factor VIII that they used to clot their blood, and it was infected with HIV and hepatitis C. And of course, they're medicating themselves 2-3 times a week with this, so they're injecting it into their bodies. 90% of hemophiliacs today take a product that's synthetic, so they're not exposed. And that's really the way that we should be moving. We are about to do the first whole blood transfusion in the UK and by 2016 that the Wellcome Trust has financed. That's from stem cells. And so when we move forward, because it's about progressing, we will actually be able to minimize the exposure. But essentially that's the argument. It's a private... it's a way to control it, and you can't have private pharmaceutical companies controlling the blood donor market. I mean, it's pretty much outrageous.
Well, as a whole, do Canadians donate significantly blood? I mean, I know I donate, but it makes me feel good. I mean, I physically feel good. So for me, it's like a little fix. I feel like I've just had a shot of B12 or something. But some people say they feel tired after. There are many reasons. Do we need to encourage that more? I think they do a pretty good job of advertising, but maybe they need to step it up.
We do. It's interesting that you said that, because when I was growing up, I remember my dad would be like in the school gym, and they would be set up there,
I remember that too.
taking blood. And I think it's really important to culture my generation and the next two behind me, and the next ones, that's a really important value. Canadians give. They take a lot of pride. We take a lot of pride in donating our blood. And it's important to us to help our neighbor, and to keep people alive. But the Canadian Blood Services right now, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, said that they're short.
Oh, it was really short.
Yeah, and so we need people to step up and to go and donate both their blood and plasma.
Yeah, it needs to be sort of a regular thing. So, tell us about Mojo Theatre. Mojo. Okay.
We got a lot of mojo.
There's a lot of mojo.
Mojo. Okay. It looked good. I'm sorry. Mojo Theatre. What is Mojo Theatre?
So Mojo means heart in Swahili, and I wanted to the theater company got launched in tandem with this play, and it was a pretty hugely spectacular experience because I didn't have any government funding. I couldn't get any public funding to do the play. And every dime came from a citizen donor. And I thought that was incredible. I mean, we had a really successful Indiegogo campaign. And so Mojo Theatre was birthed because of Tainted. And our mandate is to do theatre with a fearless heart. And it's really the most important thing for myself and all the artists that have participated now over the past couple of years is that it's mostly important for us to connect with the audience, because that is why we do theater. Because the money's terrible, you know what I mean? And you never get famous. Nobody really likes you. You know what I mean? Nobody talks to you. So it's not like these huge career makers. So that's where Mojo Theatre was birthed from, and that's our mandate for it.
You have Mojo Theatre and Gromcat Productions, and I'm looking at your website, and you've got Tainted, the play, but you've got other projects on the go. It's quite exciting.
Yeah, it feels exciting. I feel a little overwhelmed. The play and the tour of the play is like it's emotionally exhausting because your heart breaks a little bit every time you do it. Mm-hmm. But it's a wonderful way to connect with Canadians who are just spectacular, bright, shining, pretty empathetic, gentle people on the whole, and they're really willing to share their own personal stories and to come out and connect with us, and I love that.
So for our listeners out there who'd like to see this play, where are you going to be, or how can they find out more?
So they can go to moyotheatre.com, so that's MOYO theatre.com, and we're on tour we start on Saturday for 2 weeks, and 7 cities: Kingston, Windsor, London, Ottawa, we're going to Thunder Bay.
Wow.
And that's really exciting. Hamilton, and of course Toronto. We're 2 nights in Toronto, and then we have our special presentation at Parliament Hill and at Queen's Park, and I am expecting those MPs and MPPs to show up.
And what about the rest of the country?
Well, I'm really hoping that this thing that we're doing right now and being able to see this legislation through will inspire other provinces and other theater companies to do their own version of Tainted. And at the same time, we can get all those provincial health ministers to rock it out and make sure that they ban the sale of blood donation.
What a brilliant way to bring awareness to something. I mean, there are so many ways that we're familiar with bringing awareness to causes, to stories, to campaigns. Theater is a wonderful, wonderful way that you're doing this.
Oh,
It's quite
thank you.
exciting.
It is. It's where art and social justice can meet in this really safe place.
And conviction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really beautiful thing. It's actually kind of becoming one of the last places I feel like you can do that with where people can be in that safe place and engage on an issue without being sort of overrun by a lot of the madness that surrounds political issues.
Brilliant. Well, moyotheater.com is the website. We encourage you to check out the places that you can visit to see this play. Kat, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing the story, and making us more aware of what's happening and of the play. This is very exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Might want to
Thank
check
you.
that out myself.
That was fun.
Click the channel subscribe button for full-length interviews and more from What She Said here on YouTube.